Mark was a man of few words and many thoughts. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, often revealed more than his guarded lips. A solitary figure, he could be found in the early mornings, his tall frame bent over the steaming coffee machine at the corner diner, crafting the perfect cup for the regulars who hadn't yet stirred from their slumber. His hands moved with a precision that spoke of years of practice, each gesture a silent ballet of routine and care. The diner was his sanctuary, a place where the hiss of the coffee machine and the clink of cups were the only sounds that didn't echo through the emptiness he carried within. Linda, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of chatter and laughter. She had the kind of smile that made the world seem a little less dreary. As the morning sun painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges, she'd flit from table to table, placing warm muffins and greasy plates of eggs before the sleepy patrons with a cheer that could wake the dead. Her red hair was a fiery halo around her face, and her green eyes sparkled with a mischief that had earned her the affectionate nickname Little Leprechaun from the old-timers. They were drawn to her like moths to a flame, hoping to capture a bit of her warmth. It was a typical Tuesday when their paths first crossed. Linda's usual order of 2 eggs over easy, rye toast, and a side of home fries was met with a quiet nod from Mark. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't love at first sight, but rather a spark of curiosity that made the air around them crackle with potential. "You new around here?" she asked, her voice a melodious blend of sugar and spice that could charm even the grumpiest of souls. "No," Mark replied, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Been here a while." "You?" "Oh, I've been around the block," she said with a wink. "But this place? It's like coming home." Her laughter filled the diner, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Mark felt a twinge of something he hadn't felt in a long time, interest. Mark was a creature of habit, his life a series of meticulously arranged routines. The diner was his stage, the coffee his craft, and the customers his silent audience. He knew their orders by heart, their favorite songs, and their tragic life stories. Yet, Linda was different. Her vibrant energy was like a wildflower that had found its way into his well-tended garden of solitude. He watched her dance around the diner, her every move leaving a trail of joy, and he found himself smiling at the sight of her. Linda was a free spirit, her life a kaleidoscope of adventures and misadventures. She'd traveled the world, her suitcase filled with memories and a heart full of stories. Her laughter was infectious, her spirit untamed. When she walked into the diner that morning, it was as if she brought a piece of the world with her, one that Mark hadn't seen in a very long time. Their meetings grew more frequent, their exchanges more meaningful. Mark found himself looking forward to her visits, eager to hear about her latest escapade or to share a quiet moment of companionable silence. He began to open up, his words flowing more freely than the coffee he poured. Linda, in turn, saw beyond the stoic exterior to the man who craved connection. One rainy afternoon, with the diner almost empty, she slid into the seat beside him at the counter. "Tell me something no one else knows," she said, her eyes gleaming with a playful challenge. He thought for a moment, then leaned closer. "I used to write poetry," he murmured, his cheeks coloring slightly. Her eyes widened. "Really? Will you share some with me?" He hesitated, then pulled out a well-worn notebook from his pocket and handed it to her. The pages were filled with verses of love and loss, each line a window into his soul. As she read, her eyes grew misty. "These are beautiful," she whispered. It was in that moment, amidst the smell of stale coffee and the patter of rain, that they fell in love, not with grand gestures or passionate declarations, but with the gentle understanding that grew from shared moments and quiet confessions. Their romance was a slow burn, kindled by stolen glances and shared smiles. They'd meet after her shift, and he'd walk her home, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty streets like a secret melody. They'd talk for hours, their conversations a tapestry of dreams and fears, of pasts they'd left behind and futures they hoped to share. One morning, as the sun peeked through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the diner, Mark took a deep breath and asked the question that had been simmering in his heart. "Linda, will you marry me?" Her eyes widened, and she placed a hand over her mouth. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." And so, in the heart of the diner, surrounded by the whispers of 1,000 mornings, Mark and Linda became more than just a quiet barista and a cheerful waitress. They became partners in a dance of love and life, their hearts forever entwined in a rhythm that only they could hear. Their first year of marriage was a symphony of joy. They painted their apartment with colors of their favorite sunsets, filled their nights with laughter that spilled into the quiet streets, and woke up to the smell of Mark's breakfast experiments, which Linda pretended to love even when they were inedible. They were each other's muse and confidant, a duo that had found harmony in the cacophony of existence. But as the seasons changed, so too did the melody of their lives. Linda was offered a job at a bustling company, a place where women ruled with confidence and men were but a backdrop. The office was a whirlwind of sharp suits and stilettos, where the air was thick with ambition and the scent of success. Mark, ever the proud husband, encouraged her to take the leap, to spread her wings and soar. It was here that she met Ivy, a woman whose poise was as sharp as her tongue. Ivy had a way of making every conversation feel like a secret shared, every word a drop of wisdom to be cherished. She spoke of freedom and power, of the chains that men could unknowingly forge, and the beauty of a life untethered. "You know, Linda," Ivy said one evening as they lingered over drinks, "I've made my husband a cuckold. It's the most liberating thing I've ever done." Linda's eyes widened, a mix of shock and intrigue. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Ivy leaned in, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "I mean, I do as I please. He supports me, adores me, and never questions. It's the ultimate power dynamic." Linda felt a strange thrill, her mind racing with the possibilities. Was Mark holding her down? Did she need to be more free? Her thoughts swirled like the whiskey in her glass, and she found herself questioning the very foundation of their union. Over the following months, Linda's perspective began to shift, the seeds Ivy had planted taking root. She found herself craving the thrill of the unknown, the taste of freedom that Ivy so freely flaunted. Mark noticed the change in her, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of her new job, the way she'd come home later and later, her stories less about the diner and more about the powerful women she now called her colleagues. One evening, as they lay in bed, the silence a testament to their growing chasm, Linda turned to Mark. "I don't know if this is what I want anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "I feel like I'm suffocating in our life together." Mark's eyes searched hers, a storm of confusion and hurt brewing within him. "What are you saying?" Linda took a deep breath. "I think we need to try something new." And with that, the quiet whisper of doubt grew into a roar, threatening to shake the very foundation of their love. Mark, ever the stoic one, knew that to fight for Linda, he had to understand her. But what he didn't know was if he was ready to face the storm that Ivy had unleashed. "What do you mean, a different role?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tumult within. "You know, Mark," she said, her eyes shimmering with excitement. "The cuckold lifestyle. It's all about trust and power. You'd watch me, love me, but I'd have the freedom to explore with other men." Mark's heart felt like it had been punched. He stared at her, his mind reeling. "And what about us?" Linda leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a seductive purr. "It's just a game, a way to keep things spicy. It's not like we don't have enough love to share." But Mark saw the hunger in her eyes, a hunger that scared him. Was this really the woman he'd promised to cherish and protect? The woman who had once whispered sweet nothings into his ear now spoke of chains and submission, while Linda threw herself into her new life, parading her conquests before Mark with the excitement of a child with a shiny new toy. Mark made his own preparations. He found an apartment, a small but cozy place that smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Each item he placed inside felt like a declaration of his independence. As Linda strutted into the diner, her hips swaying with the confidence of a woman who knew she could have any man she desired, Mark packed his final box. His hands trembled as he folded his favorite shirt, the one she'd picked out for him on their first anniversary. The irony was not lost on him. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and anger. "I'm moving out," he said, his tone flat. "If this is the life you want, then I won't stand in your way." Her eyes narrowed, and she leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "You don't get to leave." You're mine. You'll always be mine. Is that what you think? Mark asked, his voice low and dangerous. That you own me? You know what happens to men who don't comply, she warned, her voice dripping with malice. You'll be left with nothing, not even the shirt on your back. But Mark had already made his decision. He turned away from her, his heart a heavy stone in his chest. I'd rather have nothing than be a part of your twisted game. And with that, he walked out, leaving behind the diner, the poetry, and the woman he thought he knew. As he stepped into the cool night air, he realized that this was not the end of his story but the beginning of a new chapter. Linda's confidence wavered when she saw the resolve in Mark's eyes. She thought he would beg, plead, and eventually give in. But his rejection stung like 1,000 bees. The next day, she strutted into work, her head held high, ready to flaunt her newfound freedom. But Mark had other plans. He had filed for divorce and was suing the company she worked for, claiming it was a toxic environment that promoted infidelity and emotional distress. Her lover, caught in the crossfire, faced the embarrassment of his actions being laid bare in court documents. Ivy tried to console her, but her words fell on deaf ears. What have you done? Linda sobbed, her heart shattering into a million pieces. What we had to, Ivy said with a shrug. You're a strong woman, Linda. You'll bounce back. But as she looked into her friend's eyes, she saw the coldness that she had once found liberating now reflected back at her, and she realized that perhaps she had made a terrible mistake. The whispers in the office grew louder, the glances more pointed. Her colleagues, once her cheerleaders, now saw her as a predator, a homewrecker. And when Mark showed up at her apartment with the divorce papers and a smug smile, she knew she had underestimated him. You think you can just throw me away? She spat. I'm not throwing you away, Linda, he said calmly. You're choosing this path. He handed her the papers with a firm grip, the legal jargon a cold slap in the face of her naive assumptions. You think you can play games with me? He said, his voice a low rumble of fury. You've picked the wrong opponent. Linda's smile faltered, her eyes darting to the documents in her hand. You wouldn't, she whispered, her voice trembling. You're right, Mark said, his eyes hardening. I wouldn't have. But you've left me no choice. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal battles and public humiliation. Linda's world crumbled around her as her colleagues whispered about her exploits and her lover's career went up in flames. She had underestimated Mark's strength, his quiet dignity a powerful weapon against her games. You're ruining me, she screamed at him during one particularly nasty court hearing. You did that all by yourself, he replied, his voice filled with a sadness that pierced her heart. I'm just making sure you don't ruin anyone else. The judge ruled in Mark's favor, granting him a generous settlement and ordering Linda to pay alimony. The tables had turned, and she was now the one who felt the sting of loss, the one who had to watch as the life she had so callously discarded was picked apart piece by piece. In the quiet of his new apartment, Mark pored over his old poetry. The words of love and longing now tasted like ash in his mouth. But amidst the pain, a new emotion grew, determination. He would not let Linda's betrayal define him. He would rise from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and free of the chains she had tried to forge. And as the door to the diner closed behind him for the last time, Mark felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He looked up at the sky, a canvas of endless possibilities, and took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. The world was still full of beauty, and he was ready to find it again. Days turned into weeks, and Mark threw himself into his new life. He picked up the pen and paper that had lain forgotten, and the words flowed once more. But this time, they were not just whispers of the heart but roars of anger, of betrayal, and of the bitterness that lingered like an unwelcome aftertaste. His poetry had changed, grown darker, but it was real. It was raw and it was him. Linda, on the other hand, was spiraling. The lawsuit had cost her more than just her dignity, it had cost her everything. The job she once loved, the friends she had cherished, and the respect she had earned were all gone. She had nothing left but the cold embrace of regret. Every day she would come to the diner, hoping to catch a glimpse of Mark, to beg for his forgiveness. But he was always one step ahead, his eyes avoiding hers, his heart a fortress she no longer had access to. Ivy, too, had realized the error of her ways. Her marriage was in tatters, her career hanging by a thread. She had tried to play goddess, but the universe had decided she was more suited to be a pawn. And so she found herself at Mark's door, begging for mercy she knew she didn't deserve. One evening, as the diner was closing, Mark spotted them both, Linda and Ivy, standing outside, their eyes red with unshed tears. He felt a flicker of something, pity, perhaps, or maybe the last embers of the love he had once had for Linda. He beckoned them inside. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice devoid of warmth. "We're sorry," they said in unison, their voices trembling. "We'll do anything." The words hung in the air, and Mark knew what he had to do. He had them sign a contract that would make them his. Not just in the way Linda had once imagined, but truly, utterly, irrevocably his. They would serve him, clean his apartment, cook his meals, and when he brought home a new woman, they would stand at the bedpost, collars around their necks, watching as he claimed his rightful place as the master of the house. "You wanted to make me a cuckold," he said, his eyes icy. "Now you'll know what it feels like to be owned." Their hearts pounded in their chests as they signed, hope and desperation etched on their faces. Mark had the papers notarized and stored them away, a constant reminder of their submission. Years passed, and Mark's life took on a new rhythm. Each week, he'd bring a different woman to his apartment, and Linda and Ivy would clean up the mess, the smell of sex and lust lingering in the air. They had accepted their fate, and in a twisted way, they cherished it. They were no longer just a barista and a waitress, they were his devoted servants, living for the moments when he'd look at them with something other than disdain. One evening, as Linda was serving him dinner, she felt a strange sensation in her stomach. She looked up at Mark, her eyes wide with fear and hope. I think I'm pregnant," she whispered, his eyes narrowed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well, isn't that interesting," he said. The room grew tense, the air thick with anticipation. "You're both pregnant," he continued, his gaze flicking to Ivy. "And the babies will be mine. You'll raise them as my legacy, as a reminder of the power you thought you could wield over me." They nodded, their heads bowed in submission. "But remember," he said, his voice low and threatening, "you are still my property. You will serve me, and you will love me. This is your punishment. This is your redemption." And with that, he turned away, leaving them to contemplate their new roles, not as mistresses of the cuckold lifestyle, but as the cuckolded ones, bound by the very chains they had sought to forge. The story of Mark, Linda, and Ivy was one of power and passion, of love and loss, and ultimately, of the human condition's ability to adapt to the most unexpected of situations. Linda's and Ivy's once vibrant lives had become a shadow of what they had been, a daily battle to regain the respect and affection they had so casually tossed aside.